Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Today we are going to be doing a demo on knife skills. We are representing Meridian Community College and our Culinary Arts Technology program, and I'm Chef Ann Howard Hill. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to be demoing is how to properly grip your knife, okay? The best way is to take the handle, put it in your palm and wrap your fingers around, and then your thumb tucked underneath, as you can see. The closer to the blade that you hold the knife, the more control that you are going to have. So I like to grip mine with my knuckle of my first finger and my thumb right up here on the bolster, because it gives me better control of the knife overall. And you are going to do a tip to heel motion. Think about a choo-choo train and the tracks on the train going in a circular motion. So you will always go tip to heel as you cut, and cut away from yourself and never towards yourself. Right here we're using an 8-inch chef's knife, and we are also going to work with a paring knife today. But before we get started, it's very important that we work with sharp tools. A sharp knife does the job better. So we have in our knife kit a sharpening steel, which is this right here. And it aids in sharpening and honing the blade of our knife. So just like that tip to heel motion for cutting, when you sharpen, you go heel to tip. And what you do to one side, you must do to the other. So you want to firmly hold that steel in place and sharpen tip to heel. When you're doing that, little pieces of metal may come off. So it's important that you wipe your knife before you cut any product to remove any little pieces of metal that may have come off in that sharpening process. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to chiffonade basil. Basil is an herb. It comes in many different varieties. We're using a sweet Italian basil here. I'm just going to grab some of these leaves, and you're going to pinch them off right at the base onto your clean cutting board. In our culinary program, we compost all of our scraps because we have a greenhouse program. So we'll be staving these stems for our compost, but there's tons of flavor in the stems of herbs and spices, so you can use those throughout cooking in stocks and sauces and have them removed before you plate your final product. So we'll reserve ours for our compost bin. But for the chiffonade, you just want the tiny leaves. That should be good for now. We'll put this back on our station. So literally, you make a little stack with all these leaves. We're going to set this over to the side. And you just stack them on top of one another, and you begin to roll them up. And then you're going to take your chef's knife, and you're using that tip to heel motion, and you are going to make slices all the way down the leaves to where you end up with these pretty little ribbons of basil. And for the students that are here today, I am going to leave all my prepped product right here on this platter, so as you guys are doing your knife skills lab, you can come and look at the product to make sure you're doing it correctly. The next thing that we're going to do is an onion, okay? Like I was telling you guys in class, there is a traditional way to do an onion, and then there's Chef Ann's way, and I'm going to show you both. You always want to clean off your knife so you have a clean utensil as you're getting started. But what we want to do here is cut off each end. It's also very important on your station that you have a scrap container, so you keep a nice clean workspace, and it makes the overall job easier when you have proper room to work. From there, after you've removed both ends, you're going to cut it in half into 2 equal sections. And from there, we're going to remove the outside skin from that and peel and discard it. Again, we'll compost everything for our garden. I'll add our stems to that as well. And what I like to do is make very thin slices, just like that. Try to keep them stacked together. Makes the next part a little bit easier. This is the quick way to dice an onion. This is how I do it in my home kitchen. When I'm making product here in the professional kitchen, I use this technique for both ways. If you notice right here in the onion are these natural ribs, you can use that as your guide to follow with your knife to make your second set of cuts to end up with a small dice. So you're going to use that tip to heel and make small cuts. And you're literally never bringing the knife blade off the board. And then when your product gets too small, flip it over on its side like so and continue with that tip to heel cutting process until you end up with a nice pile of diced onions. You can also use your knife to scrape up the product and clean your board. Just be careful so you don't dull the knife or cut your hand. Again, wiping off the board here, and I'm going to show you what we do for the next one, okay? In this one, you are going to keep this root end attached, okay? So inside the onion, everything comes together at the root. If you cut off the root, all the different layers of the onion are going to fall apart, which makes this next technique more difficult. You can cut off the end that's not the root, but always keep the root attached. So we're going to cut off the end that is not the root, discard that into our compost bin, and then from here, turn it on the flat side so it's not rolling around. It makes it easier to cut and cut directly through that root, okay? So as you can see, everything is still intact and attached here, and it makes our job a lot easier. We do the same thing as with the other technique. We peel off that top little layer and the peel, discard that, and then we are going to dice this. So the first thing that you're going to do is make a horizontal cut going through the onion. Make sure you have a nice, good grip on it, pressing down firmly through the fingertips, and bring your knife back towards you as you cut through. So as you can see, there's several different layers there. And then from there, you make a second set of cuts, never lifting the knife off the board to end up with a finer dice product. And as you can see, this is a little bit smaller. I'm also going to show you guys how to julienne in just a second with both an onion and with a bell pepper. So far, we've got a chiffonade basil, we've diced an onion 2 ways, and now we're going to move into a julienne cut. A lot of these terms that we use in knife skills are French terms. For the julienne, again, like I was talking about the ribs, you're going to do very, very thin slices. That's what a julienne is. If you follow the ribs and the onion, it makes it really easy to get uniform slices. So you start with that tip to heel, going all the way through, following the ribs. And with this one, you have cut both ends off. And if you noticed, it got hard to cut because it got very narrow. I flipped it over on its side, and again, tip to heel motion of the knife and cutting through those ribs, and that ends up with a really nice, even, thin slices of onions. Sauteing, adding to salads, toppings on burgers, things like that. You can also do that with the bell pepper, and I want you guys to, in lab today, to use the bell pepper for that, because you are going to in turn take your julienne into a brunoise cut, which is a teeny tiny fine dice cut. So we are going to get our bell pepper. Obviously you would wash this before you use it because we leave the skin on. If you're getting this from like a Walmart or your local grocery store, it might have a sticker on it, okay? So it's important before you wash it to remove that sticker so that it doesn't get sticky on the skin of the bell pepper or the product. So there's a couple of different ways you can break it down. This is my preferred method. I cut around the core and the seed. That way I utilize the majority of my product, and this is all that I'm left with is the inner core. Again, we save that for compost. But you see the white section inside the bell pepper? It's bitter. We don't want to eat that. You can break it apart with your hands, but for a brunoise and a julienne cut, we need it to be very tender and delicate and a fine style cut. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna press it with the palm of our hand and make it flat on the cutting board. You are then gonna take your knife and you are gonna slide under that white part and the membrane, removing it. And you end up with this nice, smooth piece of bell pepper that has had this fibrous inside membrane removed from it. And then from here, you're gonna make those same julienne cuts just like we did with the onion. Okay? And then, if you can guys, you can see that. But what we wanna do to brunoise it is you're gonna stack them all nice and neat and in a line. And we're gonna make these teeny tiny little mince cuts. And I'm moving my fingers back as I go so that I don't get my fingertips caught in the knife, because that's no fun. And then I've ended up, and if you guys want to see, teeny tiny little squares of the brunoise cut. I'll go ahead and julienne one of these so you can see it alongside the onion. Do a little cleanup. And again, just a nice thin cut. I'm gonna discard the one with the white pith so I don't have any bitterness in my food, and that's gonna be a great addition to our compost bin. All right, the next thing I'm gonna show you guys how to do is rounds, rondelles, and oblique cuts. And we're gonna be using a carrot for that. If you could see closely, these are dirty. I haven't washed them. There's no point in taking the time to wash them if you're gonna peel them. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna use our Y peeler here. I'm gonna bring my scrap bin directly over my cutting board. You never wanna peel a product over the garbage can, because if you drop it in the garbage, it's garbage, okay? But if I drop it on my cutting board or in the pail with all my scraps, I can still use the product. So just quickly removing that outside skin so we have a nice bright orange carrot. And I'm gonna go ahead and do 2. All right. So from here, we're gonna do a rondelle cut, which are just coins or circular slices. You could do this in soups, salads, sauteing, roasting, and you are just tip to heel, making those even slices. It's very important that they're uniform thickness. So you don't want some really, really fat and chunky and some super thin. Why? What did we talk about in lecture?
Because if you cook both of them together in a stew, if you cook them too little and the thin ones are all the way cooked through, then the thicker ones are going to be...
That's right, uniform cooking. So we want things to be uniform in size and in shape, so they cook evenly and thoroughly throughout the cooking process, and so that we still end up with a pretty product in our final dish. Rondelles are super easy. You're just cutting the carrot into nice, thin, edible slices. The other thing that we're going to do is an oblique cut. It's basically a triangle. So you're going to start on the bias or at the diagonal, and you're going to make a slice, discard that. You're going to turn your product, make a slice again, turn your product, make the slice, turn the product, make the slice, turn the product, make the slice. And you end up, it almost looks like a triangle, if you can see. These are great in soups, anything where you're going to have presented, or if you're doing roasted carrot as a side dish, that's a great cut to do for that as well. The next thing we're going to talk about is a rough chop. So if we're making a stock and we want to extract all the flavor out of our vegetable or mirepoix that we're putting in, we're just going to chop it up rough, because at the end of the day, once it's finished the cooking process, we're going to strain out that product and only be left with the liquid. So you just are going to make rough, big chops and not spend a lot of time on that. And you have your chunky mirepoix, or in this case celery, that you can add to a veal stock or a poultry stock or even a seafood stock that you might be making. We're going to give our cutting board a quick wipe and clean because it's super important to always work on a clean station. And then I'm also going to show you guys how to seed a jalapeno. Okay, one note about working with any type of pepper. The skin and the inside have a lot of oils in them, which can seep out into your fingers. So you wouldn't want to touch your eye or face or anything like that after handling one of these until you thoroughly wash your hands so you don't transfer that oil to your skin, which can burn. So a lot of the heat from the jalapeno comes from the actual product itself, but it comes from the seeds inside. So a lot of times we want to remove those seeds. So what you do is cut off the end and then strip it in half just like that. If you want it really hot and spicy, you can leave all these guys in there. But if you don't, you can scrape them out. And I'm actually going to use a paring knife for that. And I'm just going to pop it out of the center and then pull it back. And it comes out just like that. And now I have my nice bell pepper that in this case I'm going to cut into a julienne. Let's pretend like I'm making pico de gallo, and I want those jalapenos in there, but I don't want a big bite, right? So I'm going to take the julienne and put it down into that teeny tiny brunoise cut. So I get the heat, I get the crunch, but I also end up with something I can actually eat without chugging my whole water. So what do we do after any time we work with a pepper? That's right, we wash our hands. There we go. I'm going to put this over here and this in compost. There are a few more things that we're going to show you guys. One being a potato, small, medium, and large dice, and how to properly mince garlic. I'm going to switch it up and I'm going to move to my paring knife. This is what comes in your knife kit here at school, but I'm going to use my paring knife. So we already have the cloves of garlic that have been broken down out of the bulb and the skin has been removed. I shared a trick of the trade with my class about removing the skins. If you have to buy the whole bulb, you break it down and you take the individual cloves with the skin still on and you put them in hot boiling water. Cover it with plastic wrap and let it sit. It moistens the skin and you're able to slip them off with your fingers really quickly and easily. But fortunately for us in the professional kitchen, we get to buy it already like this. So when you are going to mince garlic, just like an onion, there's a little root end down here that holds it together, okay? So don't cut that off. You are going to take your knife and make teeny tiny little slices all the way through the garlic. And then you're going to come and make some horizontal cuts through it, just like so. And then you come back and you make those same type of cuts just like you do for an onion. And I'm going to show you that again with another one. Garlic gets sticky. It's something that I like to cut on my cutting board last so that my other product doesn't get sticky as well. But again, you make the tiny cuts and you don't go through the root end. And then you make your horizontal cuts all the way through without going through the root end, and then you make your small little slices. And you end up with minced garlic as your final product. Okay, and now we're going to move to our small, medium, and large dice with the potato. So you could use your peeler to peel this, but we have to break it down so that we can actually make it into small squares. So we are going to have some waste here. You are going to cut off the ends with your knife and stand it up on a flat side, okay? Makes the product easier to work with. And at that point, as I showed you guys in the book, a dice is a small cube. So we have small, medium, and large, and they should all be uniform in shape and then varying in sizes. So I'm going to cut off the outside peel until I have a block, essentially. So I've got a good starting point here. And then this is going to be a small dice. So I'm going to cut this into 3 what I like to call planks, like so. And then I'm going to flip it over on its side and have them stacked neatly. And then I'm going to cut it again into 3s. And then from there, I'm able to actually make my cut to make it a dice. So I come in here, tip to heel, tip to heel, tip to heel, all the way through until I end up with a nice uniform small dice product. Anytime you're working with a fresh potato, they will turn brown if they sit on your space and your workstation for a very long time, so you can hold them in cool water to prevent the browning process. Okay, we're going to do another one, and this one we're going to make into medium. So the exact same concept, cut the ends off. We'll save those for either scrap or making them into mashed potatoes or something else. And we're going to carve off the skin and the edge and create a nice block for us to work with in making our dice. Okay? Set this over, some yummy mashed potatoes later. And we're gonna do this, but we're gonna make it a little bit bigger, okay? So instead of cutting it 3 times, we're gonna cut it in half one time, flip it over on its side, cut it in half again, and then this time with these cuts, they'll be slightly bigger than the small. Still a nice cube, but if you can see in comparison of them together, that's larger, okay? So that's small, that's medium, and now we're gonna go with the large dice. Same exact principle, just bigger cuts. Cutting off the ends, flipping it up on the flat side for stability, carving off the edges here. Never wasting anything in the kitchen. Anytime you see something like this, it's going towards another purpose. And same thing, this is a bigger potato, which is why I chose it for that large dice, okay? You're gonna make 2 cuts again, flipping on each side, and then you've got a much larger dice of your potato. And you can see those in comparison when you get ready to do yours in a bit. Potatoes are waxy and mealy. They do leave a residue on your cutting station, so anytime I cut anything after a potato or garlic, I like to wipe it off so I have a clean, smooth, non-sticky surface to work with. Okay, one other thing I want to show you guys is an avocado, okay? So an avocado has one central seed in it that should naturally pull away from the pulp of the avocado when it's ripe, okay? The easiest way to do that is to take your knife and cut through the top until you hit the seed. And then you are just going to roll your avocado along the knife and then pop it open with your knife like so. So you end up with 2 avocado halves. And then from here you can just flick it out. I don't want it to go flying across the kitchen. Use the tip of your knife, jab it in there. But if you're ever making fresh guacamole or something with avocado, you can leave the pit in there, and that helps it in the browning process. You could also squeeze lemon or lime on that, and that would also help with the browning. From here, you can do a couple of different things. So in class, we talk about using the appropriate tool for the type of product and the cut that we're doing. Obviously, this is a big knife and a small avocado, so we're gonna transition into using our paring knife, and we're gonna actually make avocado slices. So you are gonna take your knife and go right through the flesh of the avocado until you actually hit this outside peel. And you're gonna make the slice along that peel, and you end up with a nice sliced avocado. Could you hand me a spoon from over there? Look right behind you. And while they're grabbing that, I'll show you the same concept with dicing an avocado. So say you want to put it on the top of some mahi-mahi tacos or a wedge salad. You would do the same slices. Thank you. And then you would come back and go the opposite direction. Again, using the skin as your guide. And then you just take the spoon and you scoop it out of the skin, and you end up with all these nicely chopped little avocado pieces. Again, compost, and then the same thing with the slices. Scoop it out, and you end up with pretty slices of avocado that you can put on top of something or alongside any sort of dish that you would like. And then last but not least, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about herbs. As you can see here on the tray, I have some flat leaf Italian parsley. I have a little bit of fresh thyme, which has a very earthy flavor. And then I also have some rosemary. And I'm going to bring those over to my board so you can see them well. Let's move this guy out of the way. And here's our parsley, okay? So for parsley, this has already been rinsed. It's a little bit wilted looking. It's very important to rinse the parsley because it can be very sandy and you don't want the grit and sand in your food, especially if you're using this as a garnish. So in order to chop parsley, just a rough chop, which I want you guys to do today in your lab, you're gonna cut some off, reserve the rest for something else. And just like that chiffonade, you're gonna kind of roll it up on top of itself into a little ball. And then you're going to use that tip to heel motion, cutting all the way through and breaking it down into smaller pieces. And as you can see on my cutting board here, I have a little pile. Everything on the bottom of the pile hits the blade of my knife against the board so it gets smaller quicker. So when you're chopping fresh herbs, after each cut, you want to flip it over on itself to bring the smaller to the top and the larger to the bottom. And then you continue on with that process. And then if you want to get a nice rough chop on it, you can continue to go across it like so with your knife, just depending on how small that you want it to be. And again, I'm using my knife to pick it up. I'm adding it right here to my station. And the next two things that I show you guys are application purposes for us in the professional kitchen. We use the leaves of these guys right here, not the stem. We can use the stem in breaking down stock or for adding flavor, but when we want to have the herb in the soup, in the dish, as the garnish, whatever our application is, we only want to use the leaves. So what you do is you pick the little leaves off the stem, but there's an easier way to do it than going one by one. So you want to hold it at the top very, very firmly, and then just pull down and all the leaves come off. And then up here where it's softer, just pinch it off and you can chop that up. I'm going to show you that again. So come up here where the stem is still strong, hold it firmly between your index finger and your thumb, and use your other hand to pull all the leaves off. And we're able to remove them from the stem so we can chop them for nice garnish. Same thing, tip to heel. Flipping it over on itself and continuing that process. And in this case, rosemary is really fibrous. It's really tough. It's almost kind of woody, like a branch. So you would want to go over it again, just like this. And in a few weeks in Baking Lab, we're going to be making focaccia bread, and we're going to do a rosemary focaccia, so you guys will all have the opportunity to practice this skill. And so that's just a rough chop on rosemary. And then we're going to do that one more time with some thyme. Same thing, just really smaller. So you grab it in a spot where it's still firm and pull the leaves off, and then just go the opposite direction. So pulling and removing it from the stem. Sometimes you can do a couple at a time to speed up the process. And again, same motion. If you're seeing a common denominator, that is that tip to heel motion and keeping your knife blade on your cutting board throughout the cutting process. Flipping it over so that you get a nice even cut all the way through. And another reason for that is if you don't ever flip your product, what is on the bottom will become very bruised because it's a delicate product. Herbs are delicate. So you want to prevent that, especially if you're using it as a garnish, so it's really pretty when you put it on your plate. Move that over, and you guys can come and look at this as you're doing yours. Thank you so much for joining us today for our knife skills demo, and signing off.